I am here with Jimmy Gilmore. He reached out to me a couple days ago, sent me a really interesting email, and he's a guy who's out in Los Angeles now. He's a rock and roll drummer. He's got tons of experience and some huge names that he's worked with in the past, and he's been involved with the FM station, the big shindig they did have there. I guess the 10th anniversary of the closing or something like that. And he's also worked in film and TV and screenwriting. It's an incredible story, and I'm gonna let him start. I get from reading your bio and stuff that you kind of got your start or getting placed. Your mother and father were both musicians, both very talented musicians, and you got into playing drums. What was your impetus for that?
Yeah, my parents are both keyboard players. My dad was a classical pianist, and my mom was a jazz pianist, basically. And I got into music at a really young age, so I had a lot of different, various musical styles I was influenced by. My dad would play Brahms and Beethoven and Bach, and my mom would play big bands and rock and roll. And my dad played rock and roll too. And so I had a variable interest of all kinds of music. I always grew up listening to a lot of different styles of music, especially coming up as a teenager. I got into Zeppelin, but I also got into Elton John. I got into, all the great songwriting of the 70s, where a lot of that is lost these days, and it's disappointing. But I was fortunate enough to be raised around, musical parents. And so my mom loved the fact that I played the drums because she always knew where I was after school at home practicing. So she said it was the ultimate babysitter.
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
that's awesome. So now I saw in your bio, and I know I have some friends that did similar a path, but they work for like a cartage company or they work for a company, and you get to meet a lot of people. You make connections, and in your case, you worked for Drum Paradise, and that was
Yes.
around 1988. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I was walking down the street, literally. They used to be next to Leeds. There was a studio called Leeds, and they were right next door, right next to Andy Brower's guitar shop.
Okay. Yeah.
And it was Andy Brower and Harry McCarthy, who owned Drum Paradise, shared a building.
Wow.
And the door was up one day, and I walked up and I asked Harry if he needed help loading drums into a van. And he said, "Well, I do, but how do you, I mean, are you a drummer? Do you know about drums? It's very sensitive equipment." And I said, "Yeah, I could probably handle it." So I loaded the drums into a van, and he asked me if I wanted a job. And I was the first person he ever hired at Drum Paradise. And
Wow.
that's how I started working in cartage. And I ended up working for guys like Tris Imboden from Chicago, who I'm still really dear friends with today, and Luis Conte and Jeff Porcaro, who was really with Ross over Drum Doctors, but on tour, Harry used to do Jeff's drums on tour. And subsequently, sometimes he would use us to set up his drums for certain gigs. So I did that. I did Harvey Mason, Vinnie Colaiuta, and who else? A few other guys. I can't remember it right now, but those were the highlights. We did some work for Terry Bozzio at one point and Dave Weckl too.
Yeah.
So
And I have Steve Gadd
yeah, Steve
and
Gadd,
Simon Phillips, right?
Simon Phillips, yes.
And
Simon,
Ringo Starr.
yes, Ringo Starr, yeah. Ringo Starr actually showed Harry and I his cymbals he used for a couple of the Beatles records, like the White Album and things like that, that he had in his Zildjian bag, and he, let us check them out. And he was great. Simon is great. I was there the day that Simon got the gig for Toto,
Wow.
and I was actually probably one of the last people to see Jeff alive because I had dropped Jeff off at his house in Hidden Hills after a session. And Harry was out on the road doing something with someone else. And he said, listen, I got a weird call from Jeff's wife. Is Jeff okay? And I go, yeah, I dropped him off not too long ago. And then I got another call from Harry about an hour later saying that Jeff had passed away. And it was a shock because I just dropped him off.
Wow.
So yeah. So
man, that's a trip, man. That is
yeah. Yeah.
I've often on my channel talking about, the music business, and sometimes you get a little deep in your cups, and sometimes the partying can get out of hand. Did you get a sense that maybe Jeff was deep in his cups at the time, or did it just seem like another day?
Pretty much another day, although I have seen Jeff play absolutely amazing on, a couple of hits of weed, and he plays great. I could never do it doing that, but he could. Yeah. But no, Jeff was totally fine. When I dropped him off, I didn't get a sense that anything was wrong, but I heard that he had, I've heard different stories actually on how he died.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure which one that I actually believe or whatever. So
it's better to not speculate, and it's YouTube, so we have to kind of tiptoe around the reality of the rock and roll and the music business. But man, I wonder, because I had a friend that worked for Andy Brower, and his name was Keith Howland. Do you know Keith?
I think I know who he is. Yeah, I think I do.
He worked for Andy Brower, and then just happened to find out that Chicago was having auditions for a guitar player.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up getting that gig. He had that gig for like 28 years.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and that's how he got his start, was working at Brower's. I went in Brower's a couple times and looked at the wall, and one time rented I think it was like a 57 Les Paul or something. I think it only cost me like $100.
Yeah.
It's like,
back
dude,
in those,
I'd rent this every day if it's only $100. Now I got to figure out how to make the $100.
Yeah. It's like, hey buddy, how's it going?
Yeah.
That
was the golden days, really, of all of that stuff out there, because you had guys like Brower who had all this stuff. You had Drum Paradise with all their stuff.
Yeah.
And
yes.
What about what can you say about Steve Gadd? Do you have anything there?
He did a couple of sessions. One was with Quincy Jones, and I worked on that session. It was a strike and a load. It was towards the end of it, but I hung out a little bit and talked to him. He was really generous, really great guy. We talked about the traffic in LA. That was one of the main things we talked about. But struck his drums, and loaded him into a van and got him out of there for him. I saw him one other time at another session where it was a setup and a strike. So great guy.
It's amazing to get to see those guys in that situation and kind of be there. You learn a lot, right? You learn a lot.
I learned a lot about the industry, and I also learned a lot about being a studio musician, and what it was like, and having cartage, which I didn't even realize before I started. I didn't know that drummers had in-town techs to come and set up and strike their drums. And the better you were at getting their stuff right, the better you were, and the more clients wanted to work with you. So I had a couple unfortunate incidents where I'd let some friends help me a couple of times that didn't turn out so right because they didn't handle the equipment right.
Yeah.
And you got to be careful with that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a delicate thing, man, and you're teetering. You're always on the edge of getting canned in the music business. It's like one wrong turn of the snare
Oh
head.
yeah. Oh yeah. I got fired for jamming with a bass player once in
Yeah,
a band.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard times where yeah, sometimes they'll invite you in to play,
Yeah.
and it can sometimes then the drummer walks in. I mean, it's always a precarious thing. When you're dealing with people like that, sometimes you don't even tell them you play. You just kind of go in
Yeah.
and do it because it is, some guys might be, oh, you play? Oh, well, let's see what you got, and I'm like, dude, I'm not here to
Oh,
battle right now.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, it wasn't during a Carter session. It was actually a band that I was a founding member of.
Ah,
And we were auditioning bass players, and the guitar player didn't like the fact that I was improvising with the bass player, and so I got fired.
wow.
If you can imagine that. Yeah.
I can
So
imagine it though. It's the music business, man. It's up and down and in and out.
yeah.
So now there were some amazing names, on your resume, and I checked them all out and stuff, and I saw one name on there, Stevie Ray Vaughan. I just got to know what was the situation. Tell me about that.
Okay. So back in those days, I would say probably 89, 90, there was a club at La Brea and Hollywood Boulevard. And it was every Tuesday and Thursday nights. And I can't remember the exact name right now. I will in a minute. But there was always jams. People would get up on the stage and jam. And Drum Paradise, we supplied the drums for that night.
Uh,
And overdoing it over a few weeks, I sort of ended up becoming not like a house drummer, but I would play with people that would get up on stage.
yeah.
And one night I got up on stage, and back in those days, the Stevie Ray Vaughan look was worn by lots of guys. Lots of guys would wear that same
Yeah,
hat,
yeah, yeah,
and they kind of had that Stevie Ray Vaughan look.
yeah.
So I looked over at the bass player. I'm like, oh my God, another Stevie Ray Vaughan guy. And he turned around, he goes, I am Stevie Ray Vaughan. And he had jumped up on stage. And thank God I had my Texas shuffle down, because he was like, 1, 2, 3, 4.
And it's
Yeah, I
heavy
had to,
into it.
yeah, right into it. And I ended up playing 2 songs on stage with him. And
Do you,
that was my, that like Stevie Ray Vaughan short story, but I shit, sorry, my pants when I knew it was really, so
yeah.
yeah.
Do you remember which songs?
I don't remember offhand, but I know they were popular enough to where I could remember them
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the time. Yeah.
And
So
was he just breaking out the most gut-wrenching blues licks?
yeah, I mean it was typical Stevie Ray Vaughan, but I was so young and I was so worried about keeping it together and making sure that it felt right and stuff,
Yeah,
that I was really focused on that with the
yeah,
bass player. We were both really surprised and shocked that it was him. He was shocked too, you know. There was quite a few instances like that where on that night, there would be people who would jump up on stage, and you would be like, one of them, a couple of guys I can remember offhand. Little Steven
mhm.
got up on stage. Um, and I heard John Entwistle got up there. I wasn't up there when he did it, but I heard that he had gone on stage. I heard Robert Plant got up and
Wow.
sang. So it was a cool place. I just can't remember the name of that club at the time.
What
Yeah.
what year what year was this?
Probably 89, 90,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It was at Hollywood and La Brea.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything. I know what was it? Oh, Hollywood in La Brea. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, mm-hmm.
Let me think what that could have been. Oh, was it inside the Roosevelt?
No, it was. It,
Oh,
maybe it was.
I know what it was. It Ice Thai Cafe?
I think so. It was like right on that corner. And
Yeah,
no, and
yeah,
it was in a nice place because it was big. It was a
yeah,
big place. And the stage was big too.
yeah.
And it might have been at the Roosevelt, but there was a marquee that stood alone and had the name of the club on it. So
Yeah. It sounds like a place I used to play around that time, but stuff comes and goes out there, and it's hard to keep up with what is what.
yeah, yeah.
Um
I think it turned into something else over the years, quite a few things actually.
yeah, yeah.
So mm.
That's wild, man. Getting being in that situation. How young were you at that time?
26. Yeah.
Okay, well
20.
that's good. Yeah, but
Yeah.
still, and
Yeah.
a Texas shuffle is a
Yeah.
long way from the Sunset Strip.
Yeah, it is. It's a backward shuffle. It's
Yeah.
just I tell drummers just play what you would play with your right hand on your snare drum and quarters with your left hand, and you got a Texas shovel. That's
There
all
you
you got to
go.
do. you know.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
that's incredible, man. So any other like I've got Slash on the resume. What was your experience with Slash?
FM station. FM station got up on stage. He Duff got up on stage. Axel's gotten up on stage there. They've jammed there. Lots of guys have jammed at FM.
Yeah. I can
And
remember playing there one time, and I think maybe Janie Lane or somebody, I jumped up with some jam, and it was something that's something we need to talk about because
yeah,
the FM station, it doesn't get enough credit for LA and the Sunset Strip scene and just being a cool place to hang. And so many bands played there. All the same bands that played the Strip would play FM station. And
absolutely.
and in some ways it was a better experience because you had free parking.
Yep.
He would pay, depending on how many people you could bring in, he would pay. But Filthy McNasty, and that's what he was known as.
Yeah.
He
His
was an
name is actually trademarked. That name is trademarked.
wow. So
yeah.
did you know him really well? Is that how you kind of were able to get in charge of that reunion kind of thing?
Yeah. The reunion happened in a completely abstract way. I had started an Evil Knievel page on MySpace, and I had all these videos and everything, and everybody thought it was really Evil Knievel. I mean, I just everybody would write me letters saying, "Hey, I saw you in this day and this day, and you signed my bra, you signed my cast, you signed this, you signed that." And I finally had to start telling people like, "This is not Evil Knievel," and it didn't matter. Every day I got inquiries about all kinds of stuff. So I actually wrote to Evil Knievel's. I guess he had a
Fan club?
Evil was still, yeah, he was still alive at the time. And so I wrote a letter to Evil Knievel's, mailbox or whatever. And I
Yeah.
said, listen, I've got this Evil Knievel page. It's really popular. I'd be happy to turn it over to you. I've got all these abstract videos and things. And the next thing I know, a couple days later, I get a cease and desist letter from attorneys saying
Wow.
saying to take it down. And so I was like, okay, they
All right.
they don't like somebody else having control of this. I get
Yeah.
it. So I was sitting around going, I know, I'll just start an FM station page. And I
Uh,
started an FM station page, and it grew like wildfire. All of a
wow.
sudden I had, 1,000 friends, and people kept saying, do a reunion, do a reunion. And I wasn't planning on personally doing a reunion, but it was my page. And so a friend of mine named Maureen Stapleton, she knew where Filthy was because at the time nobody could get in touch with Filthy.
Ah,
He was just kind of MIA.
yeah,
And I knew and she knew that there would be no FM station reunion without his approval
yeah,
because we both knew his name was trademarked
yeah,
and we both knew that he would have to sign off on it.
yeah.
So she got in touch with Filthy. Maureen got in touch with Filthy, and Filthy called me. And I had him over to my loft in North Hollywood at the time for lunch. I made him lunch. And one of my hobbies is cooking. So I made him this really nice lunch. And he sat down with me and he liked the idea. And he said, "You know how many times people have come to me about this already, but I won't do it." He said, "But I remember you. And back in those days, you were always a nice kid. And I always thought that you were somebody I could trust. So I'm going to allow it. I'm going to do it. Let's do this
Wow.
thing." So I said, okay. And so he became the MC and the host. And I was the MC, he was the host. And I had another friend of mine named Kelly Nicholson who got us sponsors with alcohol companies and other vendors around Los Angeles. And we got a band lineup together. And I gave out gift bags like they do at the Oscars,
Yeah, yeah.
for everybody who joined and or played. And it was a really successful event. We sold pre-sale tickets, and then we sold tickets at the door, and we sold it out.
Wow.
And all kinds of people came. We had Jones Street headline. We had Paradise.
Yeah.
We had Hardly Dangerous, and we also had my friend John Grimmett's son band. John Grimmett was in a band called Black Bambi, and they got signed to
I remember them.
yeah, they got signed to Atlantic Records. They have a whole other story. You should talk to John sometime. But anyway, his son had a band named Jetstream, and so we had his son's band open the event,
Wow.
and it turned out really great. A lot of people came. A lot of people came. So,
Wow.
um, but there were people at that event who tried to take credit for that event and tried to do some things that ended up getting them sued by Filthy because they tried to open an FM station night in the back bar area of the FM station that was then a whole different bar. It was a Latin bar. It was a
Yeah.
Latin club,
Yeah.
and it stood for a while that way until it was demolished. And
Yeah.
and I think I wrote to you in your letter. It's now a kidney and it's a kidney and liver well center now, which is
Yeah.
ironic as hell. Yeah. So,
That is probably the most ironic thing is the place where the booze flowed like water,
oh yeah.
and the parties would go on, and then back in the day I guess they would lock the front door, and party would continue in there,
Oh
and
yeah.
now and now it's a dialysis center.
Yeah, that's what it is, which cracks me up. But those backroom parties were no joke. I mean,
Yeah,
Filthy would go till 7 o'clock in the morning
yeah,
with those things.
yeah,
And the FM doesn't get enough credit. You're absolutely right. It was a really easy load in. You loaded in for the parking lot.
yeah.
You didn't have to pay to play. You could bring you could be a new band just starting out trying to get your feet, foot going in the club scene, or you could be a well-established band and get people in there. And it was a real live club that you could get paid for, and whether it was free drinks or money, depending on how you did. And they treated, Filthy treated everybody really well. It's like as long as you were respectful with Filthy and didn't screw around in there, it was
Yeah.
a great place to play.
Yeah. Yeah, he was really kind to my band. He hired us one year to play New Year's Eve.
Mhm.
I think he paid us $1,000. I don't know if I ever saw any of that money, but I think it was like we got paid, and was kind of like, oh, okay, we're gonna actually, and he liked us. But I have to apologize to the spirit of Filthy because we were always very broke, And that we started figuring out that we could sneak beers in. If we were broke, we could buy like a 12 pack for $5 and then
Right.
sneak beers in so we could, and we would get in free because he knew the band and he liked us. So we'd get in free and then we pull the beers out of our pants or whatever. And we almost got caught a couple times because we made the mistake the first time of bringing the wrong beers that they don't even serve there.
Oh yeah, that's a big no-no.
And so they started like finding beers in the, because we would throw the beers away in the bathroom, like we
Yeah,
go in the bathroom and chug one and
yeah.
toss it in the can, and it would be the wrong brand, you know.
That's funny.
But we never got caught, and it's just one of those things back in the day. But I can remember there being nights like Haya Pasha Lee, the adult film actress.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
did a premiere of at one of her movies there, and
Hmm.
like her band played, and it was like it was just a whole thing, man. You never knew I mean, one night Gene Simmons was there because I think it was what was that Kiss tribute act?
Oh yeah, the guys then. Yeah, that was
Black and Blue guys or something.
Cold Gin.
Cold Gin was playing, and this was the early days of
Right.
tribute acts.
Yeah.
And Gene was there, and they were playing Detroit Rock City. And
Right.
the bass player in my band, he got to the dun, da 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 da, and
Yeah.
the bass player, whoever was playing bass on stage, didn't play it right. And he said to Gene, he didn't play it right. Gene goes, I know.
Well, the guy that used to play in that, they found a guy named Spiro, and Spiro was an exact replica of Gene Simmons when
Yeah,
Gene was
yeah,
that age, and he was great. And I
yeah.
actually went on a tour with them, and I got hired to be the announcer. You wanted the best, you got the best, but it was really to also be able to play drums in case uh the drummer from Black and Blue, Jamie,
Yeah.
would fall off his seat from being too drunk at the end of the
Wow.
night. So I could jump up and finish the set if I had to.
Wow.
and that was I did a small tour with them. We toured like the Southwest, and I went out with there was a management company back then in those days, and it was called Whoa Nelly Productions.
Yep. Yeah. I know. Whoa, Nelly. Yes.
Yep. Yes. And
Whatever
so
happened to her?
I'm not sure what happened. I know Shelly Bergwin is the manager that I went out with Cold Gin, and she knew my band Ashes to Ashes. She was friends with us from Ashes, and so that's how I got that gig. And but Nellie Alloon, who started Whoa Nelly Productions, I'm not sure what happened to Nellie.
Yeah.
I know she was married, and they were interested in a band called Engines of Aggression for a while. I think they put them out or put them on a label, and that's all I remember.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what happened to Nellie or Shelley, to be honest. I haven't seen either one of them for a long time. So,
Shelly was booked our band from
oh,
when I played with Shock, and she was, booking. And then when it was Boy Elroy, then she was booking that. And in fact, Shelly and our manager were the ones that came up with the name it said his Boy Elroy. And we come into rehearsal and they go, "Oh, we got you a gig." And they hand us a flyer, and I see this name on there, and I'm like, "What the hell is this?" I, I hate this name. And so between our manager and her concocted this name, and just to get us out there. We couldn't think of a name. We didn't know what to do, but meanwhile we had all these songs and the singer and all this. And so many years later, this is probably, I want to say like 13 years ago, I had found her on Facebook and
Okay.
I put a post saying, with an old flyer, boy, Elright, well, the name wasn't my idea. I know the name sucks, but Shelley Berggren and our manager cooked up the name and we got stuck with it. And she replied, "Oh, I would never name one of my clients and all the, and all this kind of stuff." And I'm just like, "Well, maybe, yeah, you realize now that maybe that's not, maybe the optimal thing to do, but I sure as hell didn't come up with the name." And I didn't book the gig and have a flyer already out with the name on it. Here's you guys' gig.
Right.
So, it's like, and after that, I don't know if she unadded me or whatever, but I don't know. I never had any contact again. So this was probably 13, 14, maybe 15 years ago, Facebook.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know, what happened, but that's an interesting thing you're bringing up. You got Whoa Nelly, you got
Yeah.
Shelley Berggren,
Right.
and you had some other players. It seemed like there were these, I call them, being nice, they were middle aged sort of women, and
Yeah.
they had all these young boys in these
Right.
bands,
Right.
and they would
That's
always want to give you these lingering hugs,
like
when
Vinnie Hamilton.
and so you'd have to go, oh, you smell so nice. And you'd have to like flirt with them because you knew if you wanted to get a good time slot, on the gig they had to like you. You had to, have them like you. Otherwise you're screwed.
Right. Right. Yeah. One of those women was Vicky Hamilton. She
That's
was
another
really,
one.
yeah, she was good friends with a lot of bands.
Did
Yeah.
you know Jerry Marsicano?
No, no, but I know the name. I didn't know Jerry, but yeah,
He dated Vicky for a while. He was a sound guy and guitar player, and he just recently passed. So I was just curious if you knew him.
man, I've had so many people pass in the last 15 years. I've been to more funerals than weddings, trust me. It's been
Wow.
really, yeah, a lot of people have passed away. Yeah.
What's going on with that? What's your general assessment of that?
Well, it's something they don't teach you when you get older. They don't teach you that that longer you live, that you may outlive some of your friends.
Yeah.
I've had some really strange things happen. Started with my drum teacher, mentor, Freddie Gruber, who
Mhm.
I actually do his website. Freddie Gruber, I don't know for those of you who are into drums, but he's the guy that taught Neil Peart, got Neil Peart back on
Oh wow.
track. And if you look at the last few documentaries of Rush, Freddie's in all three of them.
Wow.
And he died in 2012. And then my fiance at the time, um, she passed away as well. And so that was the beginning of it. And then a band member of mine from a band called Gods of the Radio I was in, he passed away, Steve Sellers.
Okay.
And it's just been going on and on like that. Janie Lane,
Yeah.
I knew Janie, and just so many other people. So a friend of mine named Matthew, who was the drummer, who was actually good friends um, with Vicky Hamilton. He had just passed away like a couple of weeks ago, or maybe 3 weeks ago. So it's just, I don't know. And I've also watched in some of your episodes about how you've lost touch with people or not even known where they ended up. People
Yeah.
just disappear,
Yeah.
So
Back then you had no social media, and once I left, my thing was in 94, I said, man, if I stay here, is anything going to happen? And I just said, probably not.
right.
And I went to Nashville, and I got to Nashville, and Nashville kind of sucked at the time,
Yeah.
but I'm like, I'm here
Hmm.
and I can get some gigs. I mean, I literally went and started playing smooth jazz,
Yeah.
which is this, it's a strange twist to how life is. But when you're a musician, man, it really doesn't matter what you play as long as you get paid at the end of the night.
Right. I quit the music industry completely in 95, and I actually even stopped playing drums. I just walked away from everything. And I started as a PA in the film industry, and I worked my way up to being a screenwriter. And I ended up working also for producer Robert Evans.
Let's
And
talk about that. Let's talk
yeah,
about that. I don't know if people that watch my channel know about Robert Evans. Man, he is one of the most iconic film producers of all time, a legend in Hollywood,
big time.
A Lothario of the ladies,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
He was, dude, this guy was a rock star producer, produced the film Chinatown and many, many, many more.
Right.
But
Godfather. Yeah.
the Godfather, I mean, and I remember they had an auction of some of his stuff, and man, the stuff that he had letters from, Marlon Brando and all this stuff. And what was that like?
Well, it was a big learning experience. I He told me the most important word to say in Hollywood is no. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "I don't care if you're up and coming and whatever you're doing and somebody gives you an offer, as tempting as it might sound, say no." And I said, "Well, wouldn't you be just cutting yourself off at the knees at that point?" He said, "No, not really. It depends on how you say it and how you do it. Instead of just saying no, say, I don't think I'm really the right guy for this project." And they'll say, "Well, what do you mean?" I just don't know if I'd be the right thing you're looking for. And that piques their interest.
Yeah.
And Evans was trying to get me to learn the art or make me aware of the art of seduction in Hollywood
Mm.
and about making yourself more interesting to somebody who may not know about you. And don't just say yes and jump in. Just say, "I'm not really sure I'd be the right guy." And then pretty soon they're going to want to be, they'll want you even more.
Yeah.
And that philosophy, believe it or not, has worked many times for me. And in some other times, not so well.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot about Hollywood. I learned a lot about old Hollywood and also what it was like being a producer and what he really was responsible for. And it's a lot more than you think. Um, he had a hell of a time um, doing some of the movies he put together. And it even got to the point where he even had to like write part of the script himself or add additions to the script. But his main thing is putting people together and knowing who would work the best with who. And that was his job, is putting the right people together. And I learned a lot from him about Hollywood and what it takes to be successful in this town and why a lot of people give up and walk away. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Why do you think that a lot of people, what did you learn about that? Why people would leave? Because there are
Um,
people that just, they go, I'm out, and they're gone.
there's two kinds of rejection that people usually don't want to deal with. There's some kind of rejection. Well, a lot of people, especially actors, get rejected all the time. So if you have a really thin skin, it's probably not the place for you. You're going to have to just learn. But there's also a lot of screenwriters and aspiring directors and editors and directors of photography and cameramen. All of those guys, they walk away too. And a lot of people don't want to put up with the other stuff that comes along with it. And I'll tell you, all I'll say is this: um, not every actor or aspiring musician or anything do drugs, okay? But in Hollywood, at least as far as the actors I met, all of them like have affairs. They're all involved with somebody.
Yeah.
And they may not do drugs and they may be sober. And you may go watch Alec Baldwin at whatever, AA being sober and stuff. But all the actors that I met were all had love affairs, and that was their thing. And a lot of people can't hang with that, and they can't deal with it, and they leave the industry because of the stuff that goes on. And a lot of the stuff that's coming out with P. Diddy and stuff, Evans told me about a lot of that stuff.
Wow.
He says it definitely goes on, and it goes on in behind closed doors and not behind so closed doors.
Yeah.
So, and I saw that with some of the parties I went to, and I saw people that I didn't expect to see, and I also saw people doing things I didn't expect to see them doing, and it was an eye opener. So.
You think when you see somebody on film or you see somebody on stage that you know who they really are. It's the same with a politician. You think you know who they are, but man, it's just like you act one way when you were around your parents, but then as soon as your friends showed up,
Yeah.
all bets were off.
Yes.
I think that's an important thing for people to realize, that you're never really seeing somebody's true self. Everybody has a light side and a perhaps a dark side. And even the ones that are sober, they still have an addiction. It's just not to something that comes in a bag or something that you can, smoke. So,
Yeah.
it's a tough business, and like you said, if you've got a thin skin, man, you're not going to make it.
Yeah. And, people, I also noticed that people of celebrity and people that have money, relationships are different for those people because they don't need to stick around for money, or they don't need to stick around for support. They have that.
Yeah.
So the relationships tend to be really juvenile in some ways. They're like, oh, let's play around for a while. And if it doesn't work out, fine. And they move on.
Yeah.
But in real life, a lot of relationships, most relationships don't work that way. You have two people in a relationship and they have all types of things they're responsible for, whether it's children or a career or other things they do together. They're a team, and they can't afford to just blow it off when they don't get along. They have to make things work because they have to.
You have to.
But in Hollywood, at least some of the things I saw, a lot of those people didn't have to.
Yeah.
They didn't have to stick around, and
So
so
that's why they go and they tie the knot, and then it's 2 months later they're divorced because the heat of the relationship fizzles, and now they're like, well, I've got enough money, I can just go off and do whatever. But your average Joe's got to ride it out, man.
yeah. I mean, I just saw a difference in the way some of these romantic relationships were handled, and it was very fleeting, to say the least, in some ways. So
Now you worked with Tom Sizemore,
yes, I did.
and he's no longer with us, correct?
That is correct.
And we all know that he's an amazing actor, incredible talent, one of maybe
Abs-
the all-time greats. But
Yeah,
he had that thing on his shoulder.
yeah.
And did you see that in effect, or was he trying to be good at that moment?
No, I saw it I saw that firsthand.
Yeah.
And Tom was an incredible actor. When the camera was lit and ready to go, he'd jump on that set and know all of his lines, and it would blow me away because I'd be with him off camera and he would be the most cohesive person, to say the least. But when that camera was ready, he jumped in front of it and he did his job. And he was really very underrated in that way. Or maybe people didn't realize how much of a pro he was, because there were several movies that he had done that he would point out to me. We'd watch things, he'd go, oh, I was on this there, or I was on this in this movie or whatever. And I would be like, I can't really see it,
Yeah.
but he'd say, well, if you look closely, you can, But unfortunately, he made some bad decisions with court when the judge told him, you've got to do some things, and he got in trouble. and he got sent back to jail, and eventually his career went down the tubes when, and then as it was starting to get back and he was really starting to get back up in the ranks, unfortunately he got sick and he had an aneurysm and he passed away.
Oh man.
And it's really too bad. But yeah, I saw a lot of that stuff firsthand. And I got in a really big fight with Tom because I was flying up to Prince George to work on a script that I was doing for him in Lionsgate. And every time I flew up there on the weekends, and I only had limited time because I had a job, and so I could only go up on the weekends. And all he wanted to do was go to strip clubs and party. And I said, Tom, I don't have time. And so we got this big argument. And but we worked it all out. When he came back into town, it was worked out. But unfortunately, some of the choices he made legally were not in his best interest, and he ended up losing a lot of the opportunities that he had. Because at one point, he was the highest paid character actor in the business, $6 million a pop. Yeah, he was getting $6 million a pop. Yeah. And I remember when he signed that deal on his management deal, when he was getting that, and he was getting all these great movies. He did a lot of great, big movies. So, yeah.
Partly, he always seemed crazy, and he would always, like you said, it was a character actor.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps, I talk about rock stars not taking off the cape after they get off stage. It sounds like he just lived the character crazy life that really he was just being himself in some ways, but he just couldn't figure out how to just chill. Hey, bro, it's Tuesday. Let's just, have something to eat and watch a little TV and get some sleep tonight. Right?
It's funny you say all that because Tom was definitely a rock star more than an actor. I mean, he loved Eddie Vedder, number one, loved him, and loved Pearl Jam, and loved music, and wanted to start a band. And he asked me to play drums for him. It was like he loved that whole life. He loved rock stars more than actors.
Wow.
Yeah, he acted like a rock star in his personal life.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's amazing. Is there now also you work with Pamela Anderson, correct?
Yeah. She had her first show called VIP.
Yep.
And was on TV, and I worked her first season. I started out as a second AD, and then I became a second AD, and then I got hyped up to a second AD, and then back down to a second AD. But I worked for a year on her show, and pretty much it was either myself or the second AD, depending on what role I was in that day. We were the first people that she saw every morning when she came in for makeup and all that. Wow. And our job was to make sure all the extras and all the other actors knew where they had to be and what they were doing and have their sides and things like that. But yeah, I worked with her for a year, and she was going through a lot of stuff with Tommy back then. But she was always a great mom. And Tommy came on the set a couple times, and I don't really have any stories about that other than I saw him a couple times. But she was always a great mom and always had a lot of responsibility because she was also the executive producer. So, yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Now we're getting close to the end of this. One, I want to plug. I'm gonna send everybody to your website if that's what you want. Now you're doing a lot of different things. You're still doing web design, screenwriting, production work, all that stuff. And where do you think what is the future hold for you and Los Angeles as far as we talk? Let me know what's kind of going on out there, and what do you think? What is the future?
I'd love to play drums in a band that's happening, that's gigging, that's doing things. But I am not at a point in my life where I will spend a whole lot of effort like seeking a lot of that out. I mean, I will to an extent, but mostly what I've been doing is focusing on my company called Subframe Los Angeles, and I do editing. I make music videos for for bands. I've done directing. I've done graphic design, logo design, brand, and that's all at my website, jharleygilmore.com. And you can see the Subframe thing. You just click on Subframe Los Angeles, and then if you want to listen to my music, that's all on there. My drumming and the stuff that I've done with Black Summer Crush and Ashes and all those other bands. So, but my future, I'm actually getting ready to kind of move out of LA a little bit up towards Fraser Park area.
Okay.
And that's a little bit removed, and focus on, but I have a studio here in LA that I'm always at, and I keep it. I've had it for a long time. So it's my drum studio. So I'm in LA a lot. I go back and forth, and I'm able to do gigs and all of that stuff. But I've been focusing mostly on Subframe with the gigs that I get doing that. And that's what I've also been playing percussion, stand-up percussion for various other bands, which have been great. I love doing that. Yeah. So
that's great, man. I look, man, I always love to hear, that you're still playing and you're still, creating and you're still out there, man. Cause I know I have a few friends that are still out there, but I know a lot of us bailed. I mean, some, even the famous ones, bailed, moved to Nashville, or they moved to Vegas, or they moved, or they just completely moved somewhere remote. And we both know LA has changed a crazy amount.
I mean, the traffic in here now, it's a nightmare, Brad.
Is it worse?
Oh my God, it's worse. Yes.
What?
It's horrible. It's horrible. Yeah.
Well, you don't have like long-haired dudes trying to wallpaper paste stuff to telephone poles, and you don't have guys going, dude. So I would have thought the traffic would be better now because we're not out there, driving like idiots.
No, but that's why West Hollywood has permit parking now because of what we did back in the 80s. That's why they got permit parking. That's why, but you remember how like in LA, pretty much all the days were bad, but Sunday was a good day to drive. Now Sunday's gone. Sunday's gone. It's bad on Sundays too. Yeah.
What about like 2, 3 in the morning? It used to be like the freeway would be completely clear at 2 or 3 in the morning.
Pretty much, it still is. Like if you want to drive those hours, it's okay. But just the amount of people on the 101 from Woodland Hills into either North Hollywood or Hollywood is just a nightmare every day. It just has gotten worse. But and if anybody wants to check out Freddie Gruber's site, which I did for Freddie, it's freddiegruber.com, and you can learn about that. And my personal site, jharleygilmore.com, it's got everything. And LA, I would tell anybody who's watching this, don't move here. We have enough free parking on the 405.
Woo, hey, you hear that, kids? I know most of the old guys that watch my channel, they know better than that, but I know there might be a few young kids and they're thinking, man, I can go back out there and try to headline the Roxy and all that stuff. But man, it seems like it's a museum down there now.
It is. If you go into the Rainbow, it is like going to a museum. I mean, you've got that statue of Lemmy, and you go there and it just feels like an adult Disneyland where people go to check out what it used to be like.
It used to be like.
Yeah.
And it's just not the same as it was. I mean, it's got all the same furniture and all the same stuff on the wall. But the clientele and and all that stuff it's just totally different.
Mostly tourists.
Yeah.
But the food is excellent as always.
It's still good. It's still a great place to go. And if I was still a drinking man, if I went out there, I'd be at the bar and I'd be knocking them back. Well, man, this has been amazing.
Thank you.
I want to thank you. I'm going to put links to all your stuff in the description of this video. We could do this for 2 or 3 hours. we'll have to have you come back sometime.
Thank you very much, Brad. And, hey, and continued success.
Thank you, sir. I'm very much appreciated.
All right.
All right,
Thank
have
you.
a good one, brother. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, bro.